Okay, massive breaking news regarding not voter fraud, but election fraud. Right after the 2018 midterms, we started talking about what's going on in North Carolina, in particular in North Carolina's 9th District. Now, it's really important to understand the difference between voter fraud and election fraud, although really we're talking about interference with the way an election should be held. But voter fraud and election fraud are two different things. In general, when we talk about voter fraud, what we mean is in-person voter fraud at the individual level. Someone goes to two different polling places and votes at both of them. That is a form of voter fraud. Barely exists, extraordinarily rare. Someone goes to a polling place knowing that there are people who have died still on the voter rolls, claims to be those dead people, and votes for them. Extraordinarily rare. Non-citizens going to polling places and trying to vote. Exceedingly rare. I mean, just it's almost non-existent according to every study that we've seen. What is a problem are different types of election fraud. This includes voter suppression, which includes reducing voting hours, voter intimidation, changing the requirements needed to actually go and vote, requiring IDs, which, while free themselves, require other documents which are not free or simple to get, voting machine tampering, all sorts of different ways to do election fraud. And what we had in North Carolina was an absolutely disgusting example of Republican election fraud. And now a new election has been ordered. The story in North Carolina's 9th District is of Republican Mark Harris, who narrowly defeated the Democrat Dan McCready, supposedly by 905 votes. Extremely narrow victory. But there were tons of irregularities. We found out that McCrae Dowless Jr., a known Republican operative in the area, organized a group of people, volunteers, paid shills, who knows whatever they were, to go and collect absentee ballots in person. And we don't know the full scope of what was done so far, but our best assessment is that they were doing two things. Number one, the associates of Dowless would go to the homes of in particularly known Democratic areas and claim to be election workers collecting absentee ballots. If the absentee ballots had votes for the Democrat, they could throw them out or simply never deliver them so that they would never be counted. Some people gave them ballots which were not yet filled out. In those cases, they filled them out for the Republican, signed off as the witnesses themselves, and then turned them in as fraudulent Republican votes. We also learned that while this was all being investigated, Republicans withheld damaging information about activities that they participated in. So this was so bad that a new election was ordered late last week. Republicans are silent and completely pathetic on this. We heard from the state party chairman, Robin Hayes, who issued a statement after this decision was made saying it was, quote, a tremendously difficult situation for all involved. That's one way to call it, but a Republican cheated here. What's difficult is that your guy apparently didn't really win. Donald Trump tweets about everything. Trump claims that voter fraud is so important that he needed to concoct this bogus voter election integrity commission, which of course found no evidence of Hillary Clinton receiving 3 to 5 million illegal votes in 2016. It was disbanded in shame, having found nothing approximating what Donald Trump claims exist. And Trump has been completely silent on Twitter about what's going on in North Carolina. In the Oval Office late last week, he was sort of forced into giving some kind of answer about it. And he said, well, I condemn all fraud, including North Carolina. So, of course, Republicans are silent. Why? Because they try to win with election fraud while claiming that it's actually voter fraud that's the problem. Voter fraud is not a problem. Something like 14 convictions for in-person voter fraud have been uncovered. Now, there's a counterpoint, which is, well, not everyone is caught, so not everybody gets convicted. Even if you accept every single allegation of voter fraud as actual fraud, you're talking about 0.0002% of the votes that are cast statistically meaningless, but we have Republicans on record saying they can win with these tactics. Remember Mike Turzai from Pennsylvania talking about it? He straight up admitted voter ID could help Mitt Romney win.
We are focused on making sure that we meet our obligations that we've talked about for years. Pro-Second Amendment, the Castle Doctrine's done. First pro-life legislation, abortion facility regulations in 22 years, done. Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania, done.
Right. Voter ID. They see it as something that can win them elections. So the questions that now come up in North Carolina's 9th District. Number one, does the Republican Mark Harris even run in the special election? It's not just a redo of the last election. My understanding is that there is actually now an actual new election process, and it's possible that Mark Harris may not even run. That's interesting. But more importantly for me, does anybody go to prison here? Does anybody go to prison, Pat? Because they should. And if Harris is connected to this, he should go to prison. But I think the most likely scenario is nobody ends up doing time for really serious election fraud.
I totally agree. If there's wrongdoing, then people should go to prison because this is very important. It's the most important thing to our democratic institution, free and fair elections. But hey, I am glad that we're going to have a redo election. That happens very rarely. The last time it happened with the congressional election was back in the 1970s. So I think we can take that as a win. Let's go out there, get out the vote, and win this seat for the Democrats.
Yeah, this is a really important thing in general. So obviously in the 9th District, in the new election, everybody's got to get out and vote. Because imagine if after all this, either Mark Harris or another Republican win again. I mean, disaster. Okay, but we can't allow that to happen. But the message for progressives is if every progressive votes, this stuff what matters way less because it's too small a number to really make a difference unless they become even more blatant. So in this particular case, they probably manipulated more than 905 votes, and 905 votes was the margin of supposed victory for the Republican. Okay, they were blatant enough that they got caught, and now we believe we are going to get a new election. Great. Voter turnout is 40 to 50% in a lot of these races. If progressives actually turned out in droves and significantly increased voter turnout, they now need to steal 30% more, 50% more, twice as many votes in order to flip the election. How are they going to do that short of actually just changing numbers in the voting machines, in election machines, without creating even more noticeable activity and a trail of criminality? So yes, we need to fix all of these issues. We need to focus on election fraud and voter suppression. Voter fraud is not actually the problem, but we solve 90% of these problems if every single progressive actually gets out there and votes. And I hope that you will in 2020. I know I will be voting, starting with the primary at every level here for the foreseeable future, as I have been doing for a really long time. Make sure to follow the David Pakman Show on Instagram, where I often do Q&A sessions with the audience. David Pakman Show on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram at david.pakman as well. Today's program sponsored in part by ZipRecruiter. Hiring is challenging, but there is one place you can go where hiring is simple, fast, and smart. It's a place where growing businesses connect to qualified candidates, and the place is ziprecruiter.com/Pakman. ZipRecruiter will send your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards, but they don't stop there. They use their powerful matching technology where they will scan thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and invite them to apply to your job. As the applications come in, ZipRecruiter analyzes each one, spotlights the top candidates so you never miss a great match. And ZipRecruiter is so effective that 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate through the site within the first day. And right now, my listeners can try ZipRecruiter for free at this exclusive web address, ziprecruiter.com/Pakman. That's ziprecruiter.com/Pakman. One more time, ziprecruiter.com/Pakman. It's the smartest way to hire.